Hi guys, welcome to Office Blokes React. I am Office Bloke Dave.
I'm Office Bloke Mike.
I'm Office Bloke Daz.
Collectively, we are the Office Blokes.
Indeed.
Your go-to geopolitical pundits. We know it all.
Absolutely.
We never make jokes. We've never been more serious about anything in our lives. Anything else to add to that?
No, it's true.
I think you
It's true.
absolutely nail on the head there, Dave.
Yeah, you come...
No one knows more about geopolitics, sports, current affairs than us.
The whole lot.
Yeah. Music.
Yeah. Even when we don't know it, we just make something up.
It sounds like we know
it
it.
sounds plausible.
Yeah.
And people go, that's not true. And
Yeah, of course it is.
the Office Blokes said it must be true.
100%.
Never make jokes. Right then, how India is trapping China with its military strategy.
Interesting.
Now we're going to see what someone else has got to say about this, even though we're already experts in all this sort of
Yeah,
stuff.
let's
I
see,
think.
let's see what they got to say. See if they agree with us.
Yeah, we'll see if they get it right. So this is a new channel for us, actually. Someone DM'd me this channel and said it's good geopolitical sort of interesting stuff.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's find out
okay.
how India is trapping China with its military strategy. Let's do it.
विस्तारवाद का युग समाप्त हो चुका है ये युग विकासवाद का है
Troubles began as early as 2013 when China expanded its Belt and Road Initiative. Massive construction projects in Pakistan, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, and the Maldives caused unease in Delhi.
If you ask me, is our relationship normal today? My answer to you is no, it is not.
China is clearly becoming a much stronger military power.
India has also stepped up its participation in the Quad, which is a group of 4 countries, including the US, Australia, and Japan.
Hi everybody, in the past 3 episodes of the geopolitical series, we saw how China started with something called the Belt and Road Initiative to conquer the world trade. Now just to give you a quick recap, firstly, China strategically used Djibouti, Sri Lanka, Myanmar and Pakistan's weak economic situation to surround India. Secondly, China spent billions of dollars into building oil refineries, high-speed cables, railway lines and even gas pipelines to build an alternate trade route around India. And lastly, China is building an extremely strategic railway line from London to China and another railway line from China to Iran, passing through Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, finally ending at Tehran in Iran. This is how China is literally building its own trade route to become an economic superpower, and in this process, China intends to surround its rivals like India and eventually gain military and economic advantage over the United States. This is what we have covered until now. Now, when China is doing so many things, India is obviously not a saint to keep quiet and let China become stronger, right? So the question over here is, what exactly is India doing to tackle the security implications of the Belt and Road Initiative? What is India's strategy to face China in case of a military conflict? And lastly, what are the study materials to help you understand India's geopolitical moves better? This video is brought to you by Wintwealth, but more on this at the end of the video. The answer to this lies in a very important quote by a historian named Alfred Thayer. In his theory of sea dominance, Alfred Thayer said that whoever conquers the Indian Ocean will dominate the whole of Asia. So let's try to understand why is the Indian Ocean so important in geopolitics. Well, if you look at the world map, you will see that the Indian Ocean region consists of 28 countries spanning across 3 continents and covers 17.5% of the global land area. These countries include 21 members of an association called the Indian Ocean Rim Association. This includes major nations like Australia, Bangladesh, India, Indonesia, Iran, Kenya, Malaysia, Oman, Singapore, South Africa, Sri Lanka, Thailand, UAE and Yemen. Then there are 7 others who are not a part of this association, which includes Brunei, Cambodia, Maldives, Myanmar, Pakistan, Timor-Leste and Vietnam. And this region is home to over 35% of the world's population, which is around 2.6 billion people. Now, if you notice something very peculiar about all these nations that I stated, you will realize that the Indian Ocean region is home to some of the fastest growing countries in the world. Secondly, it is one of the most strategic regions in the world, which falls at the crossroads of the global trade itself. The Indian Ocean connects the international economies in the North Atlantic to the Asia-Pacific region. And secondly, the major sea routes that connect the Middle East, Africa and East Asia with both Europe and America also lie in the Indian Ocean itself. And what is absolutely mind-boggling about the Indian Ocean is that 80% of the entire world's maritime oil trade flows through just 3 narrow passages of the Indian Ocean. These passages are at the Strait of Hormuz, Strait of Malacca, and the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb. These points are what we call as choke points, as in, if you choke these points, the major part of the world trade itself will come to a standstill. If this is very clear to you, let's understand these choke points better. The Strait of Hormuz is a strait between the Persian Gulf and the Gulf of Oman. The Strait of Malacca, as you know, is this place between the Malay Peninsula and the Indian Ocean island of Sumatra. The Bab el-Mandeb is a strait between Yemen on the Arabian Peninsula, Djibouti, and Eritrea in the Horn of Africa. This strait connects the Red Sea to the Gulf of Eden. And apart from these 3 choke points, we have 4 more, which are the Mozambique Channel, the Suez Canal, the Sunda Strait, and the Lombok Strait. Now, if you remember from our previous episode, China has very clearly entered very close to all these choke points. To establish dominance over the Strait of Hormuz, China has the Gwadar port in Pakistan on a 40-year lease. And it also has its infrastructure and railway lines to Iran. To establish dominance over the Strait of Bab el-Mandeb and the Suez Canal, China has debt-trapped Djibouti to build its naval base. And then, to capitalize on the Strait of Malacca...
Do you think that's why there's big conflict in Yemen at the moment?
No.
And why it's being backed up by... Because it's like Western democracies that have got something to do with that. Is it potentially trying to get a stranglehold in Yemen because the other side of the strait, China, are potentially...
I don't think that's been one of the reasons.
I think it's
Yemen,
more. I think it's more religious with the Yemen thing. I think Saudi Arabia have got that sort of like area like locked down for that. What he's talking about there, he's talking about the oil that goes around. So most of it that comes through there. When you're talking oil from that region, you're talking Saudi Arabia that's coming through that sort of like strait there. The Bab el, whatever it's called. That's mostly Saudi oil that's coming out of there. When you look at the Strait of Hormuz, that's you got the Iranian sort of side that comes there, because that's the tip of that goes up at the top. Right at the very top is Oman, a part of Oman. Although Oman sort of like comes further down, and the UAE goes across. On that tip of it's still Oman. So when you cross over, you're going into Bandar Abbas in Iran. Where that sort of like curves around like that's the bulk of all the oil trade that comes out of Saudi Arabia and Iran.
Right.
So the ships are coming through that route as well. Yeah. Sort of thing. So it's very political over there, purely based on religion as well. Right. And you see Iran causing quite a bit of trouble sometimes in the Strait of Hormuz, sort of thing. So
it's been on the news quite a bit, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Sunda Strait and the Lombok Strait, China has made strategic alliance with Indonesia to build its infrastructure projects. And if you go through the details of the Chinese relations very closely, you will see that China has already established very close relations with the Mozambique government and has established control over a port called the Dar es Salaam port in Tanzania. So in short, the world trade can be stopped within a jiffy if you have control over these choke points in the Indian Ocean. And at the same time, if you do not have control over these points, your enemy can block your trade in no time. And quite evidently, China has slowly extended its dominance over all these choke points. This is the reason why the Indian Ocean is an extremely crucial region with respect to maritime trade, and more importantly for India because of China. But the story does not end here. Apart from maritime trade routes, the Indian Ocean contains some of the most precious resources in the world. In fact, a large portion of the resources of the Indian Ocean is yet to be explored. And it is said that 16.8% of the entire world's reserves and 27.9% of natural gas reserves are in the Indian Ocean itself. And this is where the Indo-China conflict comes in.
The string of pearls theory, very simply, is that China is trying to encircle India with a number of naval bases in surrounding countries in such a way that it's like a string of pearls around your neck, which the Chinese can then tighten to choke you and choke your neck.
There is a Cold War that is created between India and China.
The string of pearls theory has been discussed for more than a decade, and the Ukraine crisis has renewed interest in the subject.
My answer to that has always been, even if they're trying to do it, which is debatable, I would say that India has a fairly robust neck and that is not so easily strangled.
China has very...
I like hearing people talk like that. And like there's a perceived threat and they're like, we can handle ourselves.
Yeah.
In a very subtle...
Talking about a pearl necklace.
I've been not using that joke purposely for the whole thing.
It's gonna stretch to the map of Hawaii in a minute, isn't he?
Yeah. I mean, not so long ago it showed it up about those how critical those routes are, where that tanker got stuck in the Suez Canal, didn't it?
Canal, yeah.
And it absolutely stopped trade going. It's like for weeks and weeks, wasn't it?
Well, that's a cut through for all kinds of trade. When
you're
talking these straits, they're talking there. Majority is the oil trade. And when you look both sides of them, if you look the country down the middle of them, two straits are like run like that. Got Hormuz and then the Bab el, I can't remember what it was called. It's that country in the middle, Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
So, but if they've got Djibouti and Yemen and places like that, they've got the stronghold of that port, the Gulf of Aden, sort of thing. So it's I don't know, it's what goes on around there, and how they can block it and how they can stop it. And then you've got Iran on the other side. All of a sudden, Saudi become kind of like stuck. But what you've got with Saudi, they've got an oil pipeline that runs from, I think it runs from Jubail on the east coast all the way through to Jeddah on the west coast. So when you can refuel in Jeddah, or you can fill up the tanks in Jeddah and go through the Suez Canal and you're straight into the Mediterranean.
Yeah.
Right.
Or the Adriatic or whatever it takes you out into that
so
area.
Blocking these routes, I mean, obviously China have got to get things out as well, won't they? You know, because a lot of their GDP, I'm guessing, comes from exports.
It's
got to be absolutely huge, because it's huge,
it's massive,
it?
Yeah.
So it's
but no one's blocking their way for China.
No,
China don't have to go through them routes. China can still pass through.
Yeah,
but China can also sail all the way around or wherever they need to go, around the whole of Africa or wherever
they're going
they
about
need to go.
Train lines and everything, aren't they?
But they've got the train lines, and train lines have been. They have had a train line for a long time, haven't they?
Yeah,
because you have the Trans-Siberian Railroad, things like that, which is.
So this is more not so much about spiting themselves by cutting off their own trade. It's stopping the oil from other places to essentially cripple the West if we run out of oil.
Certainly having the sort of like means the power to do it. Being in the right position to be able
strategic
to do it,
locations. That's what you see. I mean, you look at US bases or Air Force base, whatever you call them, military bases around the world. They're all strategically located.
Absolutely.
That's obviously the reason behind it. Also,
a lot of it is to counteract things like this, I suppose, isn't it? I guess, but from China.
I wonder if some of the push towards electric vehicles is to do with all this. Because we reacted to a video that was about the fact that over its lifespan, production, everything else, electric vehicles aren't actually greener than the petrol or diesel equivalent. So there could be more of a nefarious thing of stop our reliance on oil.
But it's got to be a part of it, hasn't it?
But what you've got with oil, not all oil comes from just Saudi Arabia.
No,
Norway produce oil, the North Sea produce oil, USA, Scotland, Nigeria. West coast of Africa's big on oil. So there's loads of places to sort of go for it. Saudi's just the biggest oil producing country.
I think looking at the bigger picture, I think countries will be looking at going electric because of that reason. I would guess.
Stop reliance on other countries.
Yeah, or just buy their oil from somewhere else, I suppose.
Oh, sorry.
China has very strategically emerged as one of the most important trading partners of the Indian Ocean region, and it accounts for 16.1% of its total goods trade as of 2017. And like we saw in the Belt and Road video, in the past 2 decades, China has been building infrastructure projects in Sri Lanka, Myanmar, Pakistan and Djibouti. Why? Because all of these regions fall in the trade route of China's oil imports and their exports to Africa, Middle East and Europe. So we have the Gwadar port in Pakistan, Hambantota port in Sri Lanka, Djibouti's naval base and even Myanmar's Quake Phu port. This is what is being called as the strings of pearls theory. Now the burning question over here is, what exactly is India doing to tackle it? Well, instead of openly and boldly announcing its strategy like China, India has been slowly and steadily operating in a stealth mode with something called the necklace of diamonds strategy. To understand this, let's take a look at the list of strategic bases India has set up with partner countries as well as the various trade agreements that India has signed. And by the way, you must have seen a lot of people who often criticize the Prime Minister saying that he's wasting India's money by taking a world tour. Well, for those of you, here's why the Prime Minister of India spends countless hours in traveling all around the world.
हम अपने देश की अखंडता और संप्रभुता के साथ समझौता नहीं करते हैं। जब भी समय आया है, हमने देश की अखंडता और संप्रभुता की रक्षा करने में अपनी शक्ति का प्रदर्शन किया, अपनी क्षमताओं को साबित किया। चाहे स्थिति कुछ भी हो, परिस्थिति कुछ भी हो, भारत पूरी दृढ़ता से देश की एक एक इंच जमीन की, देश के स्वाभिमान की रक्षा करेगा। हमारे लिए भारत की अखंडता और संप्रभुता सर्वोच्च है और इसकी रक्षा करने से हमें कोई भी रोक नहीं सकता।
First, let's start from the counter for China's strategic placement at Gwadar and Djibouti. For this, India has very cleverly placed its base over here in Oman, and here's where we have the Dakum port. The Dakum port is where India's important crude imports flow from the Persian Gulf. This place is strategically located on the southeastern seaboard of Oman and is overlooking both the Arabian Sea and the Indian Ocean. On top of that, it is also straddled along the critical sea lanes in the Arabian Sea and the Gulf of Eden. And all thanks to India's relation with Oman, we have military access to this port, which makes it a great defense point. Then we come to this region that is close to the second choke point, which is the Mozambique Channel. In 2015, Modi ji signed an agreement with the Seychelles president to develop a place called the Assumption Island for military use. But unfortunately, after this deal was done, there were a lot of protests, there was a change in government, because of which this diamond as of now is in a shaky situation. Then we come to perhaps the most important choke point of all, which is the Strait of Malacca and the other two choke points right beside it. Here's where we have the Changi Naval Base, wherein in 2018, Modi ji signed an agreement with the government of Singapore. This agreement has provided direct access to the Indian Navy itself. So while sailing through the South China Sea, the Indian Navy can refuel and rearm its ship through this base. This is followed by the Sabang port in Indonesia. And again, in 2018, India got military access to Sabang port, which is located right at the entrance of the Malacca Strait. So theoretically, we have a firm grip over the Strait of Malacca. And if you remember from our China's BRA video, 70% of China's oil supply and 60% of their trade passes through the Strait of Malacca. So choking this point is like choking the Chinese economy itself. After that, we have the Indo-Vietnam Diamond, and long story short, we have historically had a great relationship with Vietnam. We supply some of the most important defense equipment to Vietnam, and we have signed a comprehensive strategic partnership with Vietnam in 2016 itself. Then we have our important diamond in Japan. On 9th of September 2020, India and Japan signed something called the Acquisition and Cross-Servicing Agreement that would allow militaries of both these countries to exchange supplies and services on a reciprocal basis. So again, Japan and India can use each other's port as per their strategic requirements. And the best part about this point is that if you look at the map, you will see that it gives us a very close placement to the mainland of China itself. And then we have Mongolia, where Modi ji became the first Indian Prime Minister to visit, and more importantly, India has established a very strong relation with Mongolia by giving out a $1 billion credit to develop an air corridor for Mongolia. And lastly, we have the Chabahar port in Iran. And if you remember from our China video again, Iran is also a part of the Chinese BRI initiative, wherein they have a railway line from China to Iran, passing through Kyrgyzstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan to finally ending at Tehran in Iran. So here's where India very cleverly understood the importance of Iran. So in 2015 itself, when Iran was facing crippling economic sanctions and diplomatic isolation, India agreed to develop a deep water port in Chabahar on the Gulf of Oman. And as a part of this deal, Modi ji visited Iran and signed the agreement worth $500 million to develop this port and related infrastructure. And if you see, it's not just strategic with respect to China's infra in Iran, but also very close to the Gwadar port in Pakistan. Now, if you connect all these points together on the world map, you will see that it's literally a necklace around China, and more importantly, they are strategically located points that can be used to counter the Chinese in case of any military conflict. Now, although the relations with all these countries is not as ideal as we would like, it is a very significant step to make sure that the dragon is not left completely loose. This is what India is doing to make sure that we are protected from the notorious Chinese moves. And this brings me to the most important part of the episode, and that are the study materials to help you understand India's geopolitical relations and strategy better. Before we move on, I want to thank our
Segue. Is that the end?
Yeah.
Yeah, looks like it. That was really interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, especially when you travel around some of them regions and you see the massive influence that China has on certain countries and the massive influence India has on other countries.
Yeah, absolutely.
So like you see them jockeying for them positions to invest in these poorer countries. Not saying they're all poorer countries, because obviously places, Oman's not a poor country.
More developing economies, though.
Yeah, it's always strategic, very much so, isn't it? Where they start developing and start investing in these places. That's the whole point of it. I think a lot of the times.
Britain have got a massive sort of like influence over Oman as well.
Right.
Sort of thing. So there's like all strategic stuff around there. Same as the UAE, same as Saudi Arabia. When you look at different what the deals we've got in the Middle East is very sort of like still very volatile, and it always will be for different reasons.
Yeah.
But one of the reasons is oil.
course, it's a huge reason, isn't it?
Kuwait, which we've seen with Kuwait and Iraq over the years.
Well, yeah, like people have always said, if Kuwait didn't have oil, then would anybody have gone in there and done anything about it? Yeah. I don't know. But
it seems like a lot of India's alliances there were based on financial incentives, though. It's like $1 billion to secure the airspace above Mongolia and 500 million for one of the other bases, and it's like there's some very fickle foundations. In terms of like a legitimate global conflict, World War III breaks out. You might find a lot of people switch sides, or you just don't know, because a couple of those ports he showed didn't seem that.
Well, Duqm, I know Duqm Port in Oman, and it's still a very small, growing port sort of thing. It's nowhere near like you've got.
It's not a base, is it?
Places like that. No, it's not. It's not a major hub like you've got. Then obviously places like Dubai or Jebel Ali. Places like Port Salalah in Oman's are probably a bit bigger than Duqm. It was one of them ports where I think when we did a route survey into Duqm, and I think from what I remember, I think it was very hard to get to.
Right,
it was challenging to get to. It was either a mountainous area where we couldn't get through the mountain sort of thing for whatever we was trying to take, and it was just very difficult to get oversized equipment down there without putting it on a boat and sailing it around and just going through the land sort of thing.
I mean, all these places are really just strategic. They don't necessarily have to have a lot of kit there, a lot of personnel. It's just where they are, and they have got something base there in case certain things, or even if it's not like a full-scale war or just any conflicts, then at least they've got something there in the right position.
Military. Duqm became military for India, didn't it? Like a military presence in that sort of in that region, which they used there. For that.
If you look at some of the US bases that we've seen, and the ability to establish a base within, what was it, like a week or something, and then it's just shipping containers, everything's modular and comes out. I suppose it's such a vast area we're talking about here. Securing too many places like that would be a proper overreach.
Like you say, it's a cold one. All you have to do is cut somewhere off for a few days, and you look what happened in the Suez Canal, where that evergreen boat blocked the canal.
Yeah.
Look what happened there with production.
Yeah.
Of everything, and the old third party logistics industry went in pear shape because of they couldn't get products on for what it was doing. The delays were too big.
Yeah, and a lot of these things, it's just getting countries to know that you could do something if you wanted to. So that's when negotiations come in before things sort of like escalate sometimes as well. Knowing that a country could block a supply line of, then maybe other countries, whatever the argument is, they might maybe more likely to come to the negotiating table and try and settle it, sort of thing.
I think if there's a World War III, it's going to break out in the East, isn't it?
I don't know.
I think it's like you just look at the tensions and the ramping up of militaries and stuff, and I think it would. It could even be,
just need someone to bite, and then once someone gets bit, then that's it.
Yeah. Well, you think about the First and the Second World War starting in Europe and then sort of spreading from there. Imagine if World War III kind of happened over there and we weren't even players, if you know what I mean. Like, I suppose our sort of ego as a nation and other Western countries are that we would be pivotal in all this stuff, and it could be that this whole thing happened. And we supply weapons like we do in Ukraine, or we're not actually this huge part of it.
I suppose possible, unlikely, but possible.
You just never know, do you?
Oh, that's it. You never know.
The size of the militaries we're talking about and the budgets and everything else there. There's not a lot of reason for things to come over here necessarily, unless there's certain allegiances. Like if Japan got invaded, they're allied with the States, who have to look after them, and then we're allied with the States, so then we'd get involved.
Well, it all becomes about global trade, doesn't it? It's like you're defending what you need.
Yeah.
Not what's not yours. You're defending what you need. How's it going to affect your
country and
everything that comes to you, sort of thing. You don't own the road outside your house, but if someone can put a big hole in it, you'd be like, hey. You get involved, wouldn't you?
Yeah, absolutely.
Massive hole. It's not my road, but you know what? I need that fixing because I need to get past.
Yeah, exactly.
Interesting one, that though.
Yeah. Hope you guys enjoyed it as well. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I'll catch you on the next one.
Cheers, guys.
Cheers.